Thank you all so much for being on time and for joining this webinar. It will be available afterwards if you want to share it with anyone. Even your team members would benefit from this because there's some ideas in here for them to practice as well. So the topic today is improving team well-being. As you all know, this is a topic I'm extremely passionate about because I think it's something that is a lifelong endeavor. We're always looking for ways to be happier, healthier, find more meaning and life satisfaction, and well-being does that for us. For those that I don't know, my name is Kirsten McKenna. I'm a leadership and performance consultant and a well-being expert. So I've spent the last 6 years immersed in the world of positive psychology and well-being. And I personally find my own well-being through practices such as meditation, regular goal setting, gratitude, social connection through work and socially through friends and family as well, and through volunteering. So I thought I'd throw that up there just to give you an idea of what you can do to improve your well-being. Thanks, Sue. Can everyone hear me okay? Can I just get you to pop into the chat? The audio is bad. Okay. Let me move. I'm going to take you with me so that the audio improves. 1 second. Okay. I'm just going to move into another room that's a bit closer to our modem. Okay. Perfect. It might be NBN. Who knows about that, right? Something might be going on with everyone working from home. Okay, perfect. Thanks for that, Sue. We will move on into the agenda. So today we're going to be going over what well-being is, what's the return on investment of well-being, what can happen when we don't make well-being a priority, and how you can personally drive well-being within your teams and organization, followed by a Q&A at the end. So when we look at the current statistics, we are aware that 1 in 5 Australian workers will experience a mental illness within the next 12 months. And this can range from stress, anxiety, depression, to something more extreme such as burnout. And when we contribute to our own well-being, we help lower that statistic within our own teams and within our own workplace. We also know that 85% of Australian workers will experience some sort of negative stress on the job over the next 12 months. And this will result in 20 million sick days. And so you can see the financial reason for investing in well-being. Not only is it good for our people on a personal and professional level, but financially for our organizations, it's a good investment to make. Now, there are a lot of definitions of well-being out there. And I like to use this one from Martin Seligman. And he says well-being is feeling good and functioning effectively. That is a nice summary. And what happens when we don't possess well-being is it can lead to burnout. And that's when we have long-term stress that is combined with the depletion of personal resources. That's okay, Sue, no problem. When we look at the return on investment, it's $5.81 for every dollar that you put into well-being. And how they calculated this is they looked at absenteeism, presenteeism, the cost of workers' compensation related to mental health issues, the cost of disability. And then they also looked at workplace productivity and performance, engagement, and workplace culture. And so you can imagine it was a pretty difficult number to come up with. And if you look at all of the research that is out there, it varies anywhere from $5 to $9 for every dollar that you do invest in well-being. Now, as I mentioned, there are a number of definitions of well-being. One that we mentioned already from Seligman, feeling good and functioning effectively. I also like this one because it talks about having a balance between your personal resources, psychological, social, and physical, and the challenges that you face day to day, the psychological, social, and physical challenges. And so if we have a balance between our personal resources and the challenges that we face, we are said and thought to have well-being. The good news is that we're not always going to be in balance. And so if I'd ask you, how many of you personally feel like you're in balance 100% of the time, I'm assuming based on history that very few of you would put up your hand and say, yes, I feel pretty balanced all the time. And that's okay, because when we're imbalanced is when we're being challenged and when we're under stress. And we also know that stress isn't always negative. We need it in order to grow. But we want to be able to get back to that balance a lot quicker than we perhaps traditionally would have in the past. We don't want to get stuck in imbalance where our resources are depleted and the challenges keep getting thrown our way. That's what leads to burnout. And so our role for ourselves personally and to support our teams is to make sure that our resources stay full, that they don't get depleted over time. And so what leads to an imbalance within our organizations? First of all, lack of autonomy. Then we have poor communication, uncertainty and change, excessive workloads, an incongruence between the company values and the direction the company's headed in and our personal core values, and a lack of recognition. And so you can probably do a self-assessment just by looking at these things that lead to imbalance and identify a few different areas that you could perhaps personally improve as a leader. Some of them aren't going to be adjustable, such as uncertainty and change. And some periods of time that you go through in the workplace are sprint periods where you do have that excessive workload. But it's about making sure you recognize when you're going through that sprint period, and then when it's over, taking the time to refuel those physical, psychological, and social resources. And so just having an understanding of how does the workplace impact our team's well-being and our own well-being as well. Within individuals, go back one. There are a number of factors that also lead to imbalance. We already mentioned the depletion of personal resources leads to that imbalance. Lack of self-care is a big one, not only for those that we lead, but for ourselves. And lastly is lacking self-compassion or having defeating thoughts. So all of these things in some way or another can contribute to an imbalance in our own well-being. And so essentially, to understand what everyone is coping with and what everyone is managing is a balancing act between our personal resources, what we have in the tank, and the challenges and stressors and expectations that are placed upon us every day. And we also know that well-being is created through intentional activities and intentional behaviors. And Martin Seligman developed a model for well-being, identifying these 5 things that contribute to our own personal well-being. And it's the same for everyone. For everyone you lead, all of these things contribute to well-being. So we have positive emotions, we have engagement or achieving that state of flow in things that we do, positive relationships, finding meaning in what we do, and accomplishments or achievements. So when all of these are in balance and we're contributing intentionally to each of these areas, we have more well-being in our lives. And so I'm going to offer you 5 things that you can do as leaders to improve the well-being within your team. And these things can have immediate impacts. So first and foremost is leading by example. You'll hear this time and time again for a number of different leadership behaviors and competencies, but when it comes to well-being, this is imperative. Do you personally make your own well-being a priority? Are you finding yourself regularly balanced, or do you find it easy to get back to balance when you feel out of kilter? And how are you personally filling those well-being buckets of physical, psychological, social? And are you making time for recovery? So we know as leaders, there's a lot of expectations placed on you. Your time is a commodity, and quite often leaders make very little time for their own self-care and their own recovery. And we now know that it's an imperative. In order for you to function at your best and lead as best as you can, you need to have a full tank. So are you making time for those recovery periods following those sprints that we spoke about? So what are well-being buckets? What are some things that you could have within your own personal buckets? I've broken them down, and this is a good exercise that you can go through afterwards as well, or even while we're going through it now, is at the top of a page, write down 3 columns: physical, psychological, social, and then identify what things you are personally doing to contribute to those buckets. What intentional activities do you participate in that contribute to each of these buckets? And some of these things are going to cross over, and that's okay. For example, we know that exercise has a positive psychological impact as well. So it could be considered physical, but it could also be considered psychological. Same with something like meditation. You can find meditation in both physical and psychological. And so think about, for you personally, as you are meant to lead by example when it comes to well-being, what are you doing for yourself in these 3 areas? How are you contributing to your own personal well-being to make sure that you have a full tank and you can bounce back from those sprint periods and stress and adversity and volatility and whatnot, and particularly during a time like this, during COVID-19? What are you calling upon so that you can lead from a calm, grounded, confident foundation? And so take the opportunity to do that and determine for yourself, do you have that balance? Do you feel balanced on a regular basis? And you'll either say, yes, I make my well-being a priority, or no, my well-being is poor and I have some work to do. And that is the case for a lot of leaders. Some of us get this right, and some of us just don't take that time for recovery and to contribute to ourselves and our relationships. And so once you go through that process of identifying, okay, this is what I'm doing for myself, and this is where I need work, then you can start to take some actions. Number 2 is connecting with your team members with empathy and compassion. And this comes down to essentially regularly asking your team members how they're feeling. And now is a prime time to be doing that. We know that not everyone is coping well during this period of uncertainty and volatility and complexity. And some people are immobilized by this situation. And some people are thriving. And it's essentially a spectrum. And for those individuals that aren't doing so well, it's really important that you connect with them and just ask them, how are you traveling? How are you managing this remote working? What's come up for you over the last week? What's gone really well for you, since you've been working remotely? And have, that positive side to it as well. Have that active, constructive responding to people when you ask them how things are going. because that will establish trust. And also finding other ways to establish trust as well is really important. Things like asking people for their input, telling them you need a set of eyes on this, giving them responsibility that plays to their strengths. All of those things build trust. Asking about more than just work, and this might seem like a trivial thing to do, and that you may feel as though you already do it, but so many leaders neglect to ask about family, about activities outside of work, about what people got up to at the weekend. Just creating that commonality, that social bond, also leads to trust and demonstrates your compassion. Being present in your interactions is key. I can't tell you how many leaders that I've personally worked with, and whenever I had meetings with them, they were distracted by their phone, by their email coming in, by something else going on in the background. And when they just offered me their presence, it was a game changer for our relationship and the connection that we had. Recognizing individuals for their efforts and being really specific about it, saying, I appreciate that work you did last week. It had this impact, well done, or whatever it is. But not only recognizing, being specific, and even going a step further and doing it publicly in a team forum makes a big difference. And then lastly is listening actively. And this is beyond offering your presence. It's listening to what people have to say, and then responding in a positive, uplifting way related to what they've shared with you. Something called active constructive responding. And you can do this at home as well. When your significant other comes home, or when a friend comes and shares positive news with you, instead of just saying, oh, that's great, ask them details about it. Ask them, how did that happen? What led to this? You deserved this. Tell me more about it. That creates that connection and builds trust with that individual as well. Number 3 is make time for positive emotions. And I talk about this in a number of my webinars and a number of my programs, because it genuinely is a game changer for you personally and for your team members. And that's because of 2 things. One, our negativity bias, which encourages us to hold on to negative more so than positive. And so when something negative happens to us, it sticks to us like Velcro, and we hold on to it, versus when something positive happens, it can be very fleeting and more like Teflon. And so it's about making time for the positive emotions, recognizing what the top 10 positive emotions are, and then encouraging it within your teams. So for example, curiosity is one of the core positive emotions. So that's about asking a lot of questions and encouraging team members to do the same thing, looking at the world through childlike lens. Gratitude. You can develop team rituals around gratitude and what went well on the weekend. Celebrating successes and recognizing others publicly, finding out what or who inspires each team member and why. Nurturing hope, and hope not in the manner of being hopeful that things are going to go well, but hope in the manner of having goals and pathways to those goals, and encouraging everyone to establish that sense of agency in order to achieve those goals. And I'll be sending more information and material around all of these things post-webinar. This is just touching on some of the key things that you can personally do. Number 4 is make goal setting meaningful. Quite often, we don't spend enough time on goal setting. And if you haven't had the opportunity to connect with your team members one-on-one and for yourself, and review the goals that you set for yourself, whether it was at the beginning of the month or the beginning of the quarter or at the beginning of the year, and determine, do I need to adjust these goals? And if I do, be flexible about it, but also always link it to the why. Why is the goal important? What will it enable them to do? What will your goal enable you to do? And then link it to your personal values. You know, what values can you call upon to support you in your goal pursuit? Being really specific about your goals and stretching them, and then creating milestones together of what good looks like as they go down that path of goal pursuit. Identifying those obstacles and ways to overcome them. So this is the pathways component of hope. And determining, you know, you are going to face obstacles along the way. That's life. It's human nature. Whether it happens to us or we self-sabotage, what are those obstacles and how can we overcome them? And then lastly, identifying any of the personal resources and strengths that will help in goal pursuit. So what core strengths do you have within yourself that are going to help you achieve your goal? And going through this process on a regular basis so that these goals are meaningful, they're linked to our values, and they give us that sense of both achievement, which is a key component of well-being, as well as pride when we do achieve it and as we're pursuing it. And number 5 is to nominate a well-being champion within your team or organization. You need someone who's regularly going to drive this. And it's fantastic if you can get a well-being expert in and create the program and create the milestones and measure it and so on and so forth. But following that, you genuinely need someone to champion the cause, someone who's passionate about well-being, someone who can make regular contributions to the team. And a good idea that I came across a few weeks ago was with regards to a hospital in the States. They created a well-being champion, and they created an Instagram profile for the team well-being to contribute to, and everyone got involved in contributing to this new Instagram profile that was well-being within their team, and how each of the team members within the hospital team was finding ways to contribute to their own personal well-being. And they'd have pictures of family, pictures of friends, pictures of their pets, pictures post-exercise, pre-exercise, pictures meditating, all of these things. And it created this connection within the team as well. So that's a really easy, actionable item that you can do. Measuring team well-being is important, you know, pre-initiative and post-initiative and throughout, to find out how is everyone doing. And this can be done personally through a self-assessment, or it can be done formally through a quick 12-question survey, just so that you're keeping track of how everyone's going and how everyone's traveling. And enrolling in free online courses as well is another thing that you can get the well-being champion to do, or even individuals on your team. I'll send out a list of free courses on Coursera and on edX that are available related to well-being. But ultimately, what all of these things do is they contribute to individual well-being, which we know is related to resilience, to confidence, to mental toughness, to discipline. You know, the list is endless. And so aside from the financial benefit to your organization, to the performance benefit, to the happiness and health of your team members, it has a knock-on effect to every other area of your life and of your team members' life. And so as a summary, the 5 things that I recommend that you can do immediately to have an impact on your team well-being are: number 1, lead by example. Number 2, connect with empathy and compassion and find ways to regularly do that. Number 3, make time for those positive emotions. Number 4, make goal setting meaningful. And number 5, nominate a well-being champion. I've added number 6 as I'm a well-being consultant. And what someone like myself or another well-being consultant can do is we can help you create a sustainable well-being program within your team. We can help you measure well-being over time, and we can help you demonstrate as a leader that well-being is a priority for you within your team and within your organization. And we also work with leaders personally around their own well-being. If you're feeling out of balance or you feel you have certain areas to work on in social, psychological, physical well-being, we help you create meaningful goals and a plan, and regularly check in with you to work towards that. And that is it. I did it within 30 minutes. I'm usually over, so thank you for hanging in there. Any questions that I can take while I take you back into the kitchen? Anyone have any questions about any of that content or any of the material or any additional resources that you think you may need? Oh, okay, I have one question here. And it's just with regards to what is the easiest way to measure well-being? I will send you a self-assessment that individuals can do. It takes less than a minute for people to do, and they can determine through this assessment, that's free, where they're sitting at. There are more detailed assessments that are also free of charge on the University of Pennsylvania's website. I will send a link to that out afterwards as well. And that is the first step, is to establishing kind of a baseline of where you're at personally as a leader and where your team is at, to determine, you know, what can we focus on? What are areas of well-being that people are lacking, and how can we contribute to that? Okay, any other questions? Awesome. Okay, thank you all so much for joining. I'll send a copy of this out post-webinar and send you all the resources as well. And if you do have any questions or need to get in touch, please don't hesitate to contact me on LinkedIn or on the email that will be attached to the resources. Thanks so much for joining. Have a great day.